Y'all thought I was finished?
Hi, and welcome back to Football Barbie, where we talk about anything and everything football here. So I'm just going to keep continuing the trend for a while until we talk about everybody. So now we are going to talk about the top 22 wide receivers. So last year's wide receivers did amazing. And are you absolutely curious to who maybe number one would be? Now, I did base the wide receivers upon ratings. So that's how people were based. But there's definitely multiple factors that you're able to base these people off of. So it's not just wide receivers that, who's going to be the top? So do you have Mr. Justin Jefferson, who's been the top for multiple things? Or do you have my favorite Tyreek Hill? So let's get started and talk about wide receivers. So, number one. Now, all of these are based on actual ratings that people have put out there, like, NFL and everybody like that. So that's kind of what I based it off of. So we will see how it goes. Now, this is only a top list, so there are people who are on this list that are from another team. So it's not just, wide receivers from each team. It could be multiple receivers from just one team. So it's the top wide receivers for the year, no matter if you're 2 for a team, 1 for a team, or 0 for a team. So let's get started. At number 1, my favorite from Miami, who was on Kansas City, and he moved to the Dolphins last year, Tyreek Hill. Now, I did hear a rumor that he's supposed to be retiring soon, and that's not cool. I definitely don't want him to retire at all. So now, he did play with 3 different quarterbacks, though, in 2022 because Tua was hurt. Obviously, he got those concussions and he was out for quite a few games. So, he was the most efficient receiver in the NFL, and he did finish with 3.09 yards per route run. That's impressive. For a wide receiver to have that, that's astonishing. It was the highest of his career by a wide margin and also led the league. So it's part of the reasons why he's coming at number 1 because, like I said, at the end of the day, it was kind of a hard toss-up between him, Justin Jefferson, and a few of the other people. But he did have a lot of really positives. He's ended the season with, now this is regular season, so I'm not counting post. He did end the season with 1,710 receiving yards. He had 7 touchdowns, 170 times he was targeted with 119 receptions. So Tyreek Hill will probably still be one of my favorite people. I think that he's a phenomenal player in the league. If he does leave, then you know what? He leaves. But everybody has their, favorite people. Up at number 2, this was also really hard, but like I said, this is kind of based on ratings. So Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, he plays for the Lions, and he had the ball going his way about 28.4% of the receiving snaps, which ranked 3rd among wide receivers last year. His 6.5-yard average depth of targets was 83rd out of 90 wide receivers, with at least 50 targets as telling. He had 106 receptions with 1,161 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns, and he was targeted 146 times. Now, honestly, I probably don't pay too much attention to the Lions. The Lions haven't been good for a while. Now, obviously, I said Jared Goff did switch over from the Rams to the Lions, and I think that has really helped out their case. I know that St. Brown definitely is a good player anytime I have watched the Lions, so let's see what happens and how he does. Coming in at number 3, probably a lot of people's favorite in the league right now. Like I said, it's really hard to base some of these in top order because it really just depends on how you're, put up the criteria. Justin Jefferson from the Vikings. He could be, like I said, number 1. It just depends. So he is a threat on all 3 levels of the field and parent because of his attention to detail and overall technical ability. He's definitely one of the Vikings' best players that they have on the team. He can play every receiver role and helps the offense from any spot in the field, even the backfield. He finished with most receptions and most receiving yards in the NFL, and he won the NFL Offensive Player of the Year award in 2022. So he did have 47 receptions that went for 15 plus yards, and it was the 3rd most in the NFL. His play was important for the Vikings when they went 9-1 in games where Jefferson had at least 100 receiving yards. So as you can tell, he's definitely one of the key staples to the Vikings offensive line. He did have 128 receptions with 1,809 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 184 targets. So, like I said, he was on fire last year. Like, you really couldn't, everybody was, in a sense, looking to Justin Jefferson. And when you did see the Vikings play, that you've seen Jefferson get the ball a lot. Coming up next, for anybody who is a Raiders fan or used to be, a Green Bay fan, but still really like Davonte Adams, who did go to the Raiders last year. And I know that a lot of people were like, who are Green Bay fans, are really upset to the fact that, they lost Davonte Adams, because Davonte Adams was a really good player. So his first year in Vegas, he led all wide receivers with 14 receiving touchdowns, which is great, especially for the Raiders, who haven't been the best team in a while. So it'll be good to see what happens this year with a little bit of shaking up. He also has 15 yards per reception, which was the highest of his career. So good for him. I'm happy for him. I think that his first year in Vegas did go over really well. I actually did a tour of the Raiders Stadium since I live here in Vegas, which I highly recommend, because I don't know how many stadiums really allow tours of their stadium, and this wasn't a super in-depth tour. Like, it was phenomenal. I had a great time. We got to see their locker room, the Raiderettes locker room. You got to go in the field, not like the actual turf they play on, but you got to go in the field. It was super, super cool. Coming up next, the beast from Buffalo, it's Stefon Diggs. He is a great player as well. I will highly admit that. He recorded 72 receptions and went for a first down or a touchdown in 2022. It was the third and most wide receivers. He lined up the slot on 34% of his snaps, which was second most in his career since 2016. He had 108 receptions for the year at 1,429 yards with 11 touchdowns and 154 times he was targeted. So if you ever watch Buffalo and you think one of the reasons why does Buffalo do so well, yeah, that would be Stefon Diggs. He is an animal. Coming up next to my own team with A.J. Brown. Now, I can't tell you how thrilled I was with how A.J. Brown played for us last season. We got him from the Titans, and I was thrilled. I don't think he really had the capability on the Titans to do as well as he did on the Eagles. Like I said, it all depends on what team that, somebody's playing for. So if somebody's playing for a team that's mediocre, like, poor people who are on Chicago, I'm sorry, but Chicago hasn't been the best team in quite some time. You're not going to be able to do as well as you are on a team that excels. So A.J. Brown kicked some serious. He had a highlight catch in a Super Bowl where he scored a touchdown against the Chiefs. That was phenomenal. He did average 2.5 receiving yards per route run in the regular season, which was the second most among wide receivers, obviously the top being Mr. Tyreek Hill. He had 88 receptions for the year at 1,496 yards for receiving, 11 touchdowns, and 145 targets. Now, he's someone's jersey that honestly I would buy, and I almost wanted to buy his last year's, but then it's like I bought Miles Sanders at one point, and then I was kind of bummed now he's on that team. So it's like, do you buy people's jerseys, but then they possibly have a chance of getting cut or leaving? Like, that sucks. Next up on the list, Mr. Cooper Kupp from the Rams. Now, the Rams, like I said, he was the 2021 Super Bowl MVP. He did only play 553 snaps in 2022, which was his second fewest in his career, as his season was cut short due to an injury. Now, that really sucks when people get injured. There's really nothing much that they can do. You're not going to have the best, statistics that you would as you might normally have. He dropped only one of his 76 catches for the lowest drop rate of his career. That's phenomenal. For people to catch these crazy balls and you only drop one, that's somebody to pay attention to. So he definitely, when you look at the Rams, you're going to look at Kupp. He was targeted on 28.5% of his receiving snaps, which was the second highest rate among wide receivers. He did have 75 receptions with 812 yards, 6 touchdowns, and he was targeted 98 times. Coming in, number 8 on the list, anybody who is a Dallas fan at CeeDee Lamb. Now, Lamb's not bad. I didn't realize that Lamb gets the ball this much, though, and has this many yards. He was the number 1 receiver for Dallas with the 4th most receptions at 107. 42 of his receptions went for at least 15 yards, third amongst the wide receivers. So like I said, he had 107 receptions. He did manage to get 1,359 receiving yards with 9 touchdowns and 156 targets. So Dak's still the quarterback. Lamb is still on the team. Let's see if the dynamic can continue between the two of them and how well he actually was able to do. Coming in at number 9 on the list, Mr. Keenan Allen with the Chargers. He played his second fewest snaps in 2022 as he was battling injuries only on the field for 526 snaps in the regular season. He did finish, though, with his highest receiving yards per route run, 2.11 yards per route run, since the 2018 season, though. So he did manage to still put up really good numbers before he had to, not play. He had the most receptions, 66, among wide receivers without a drop pass in 2022. So that's phenomenal. So 66 receptions without a drop pass. Listen to that. That's great. He did have 752 receiving yards at 4 touchdowns and 89 targets. Now, it sucks that he only has 4 touchdowns, but what can you do? Maybe he's just the person I threw to, but not in the end zone. So what are you going to do? Coming in next on the list, Mr. Jamar Chase with the Bengals. So he set the bar very high for his rookie season. However, for his second year last year, what are you going to do? He didn't necessarily do as well as he possibly could have. In 2021, he had 39 explosive receptions, 15 plus receiving yards, to just 24 in 2022. So he did manage to have 87 receptions for the year with 1,046 yards, which is still good. He hit over the 1,000 mark at 9 touchdowns, and he was targeted 134 times. So for that not being as good as the year before, that's still great. Coming in next on the list, Mr. Drake London from the Falcons. So he did finish with his highest PFF grade among all rookie receivers. He was targeted on 27.2% of his receiving snaps and was 4th among all wide receivers at the highest rate among rookies. So he did have 72 receptions for 866 receiving yards with 4 touchdowns scored and 117 times that he was targeted. So I didn't really actually notice too much about London last year. I didn't think that, he was somebody that really stood out to me. Maybe he really does. I'm sure if you're in the Falcons, you probably like him. So if you do, please tell me. So coming up next on the list, Garrett Wilson. It's kind of like, what do you talk about? So obviously for the Jets haven't been a great team. Like I said, I'm super curious to see what happens now that Aaron Rodgers is on the Jets. But Mr. Wilson ended up with the most receiving yards among rookies with 1,103. So as a rookie, phenomenal. And won the NFL Offensive Rookie Player of the Year award. So he was able to produce numbers with being on the Jets. He only recorded for 2 drops, leading to the 13th best drop rate at 2.2% of the 90 wide receivers and the 50 targets. So he did have 83 receptions. He had 1,103 receiving yards with 4 touchdowns. Next on the list, one of my other favorite people from Miami, Mr. Jalen Waddle. So he did finish with the 30th highest average depth of target. He led all wide receivers with an 18.1 yards per reception and ranked 3rd among wide receivers with 7.0 yards after the catch per reception. So he did have 75 receptions last year. He had a staggering 1,356 receiving yards with 8 touchdowns, and he was targeted 117 times. Coming up next on the list, Mr. Chris Olave from the Saints. So he did beat his previous 2 wide receivers in efficiency. The past 2 that I just talked about. He did lead the rookies with a 2.42 yards per route run, which also ranked 7th among wide receivers. He had a total of 72 receptions for 1,042 yards. Yay for somebody else to hit over that 1,000 mark. I think that's definitely clear that you're probably on a pretty good team at least, and you actually know what you can do. He had 4 touchdowns with 119 targets. So, up next, Mr. Amari Cooper from the Browns. Now, he still finished 11th most receiving yards among wide receivers in regular season. So his 2.06 yards per route run was the second highest of his career, so that's great. He had 78 receptions for the year with 1,160 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns, and 132 targets. Now, you know that Cooper on the Browns is one of the reasons that the Browns were able to do any of what they did last year. So coming up next on our list, Mr. Davonte Smith from the Eagles as well. So he just happened to rank on the list. It's not like I'm being biased. I try to be very unbiased being an Eagles fan. I will state my opinion on people. Like I said, I didn't necessarily like Hurts the first 2 years, and last year was really the first year I thought Hurts really grew into being a great player. I still think he's got room for growth. Literally, like I said, not everybody can walk out of the gate from a rookie season and be Mr. Patrick Mahomes. You know, not every quarterback is going to do that. So with Brown and Hurts playing so well, it did lead Smith to doing amazing for his second season. So passes going his way resulted in 114.3 passer rating for the QB, and it ranked 9th among all wide receivers for 2022. He did have 95 receptions for the year at 1,196 receiving yards with 7 touchdowns, and he was targeted 136 times. Coming in next on the list, Mr. Terry McLaurin, the Commanders. I'm telling you, every single time I say this and I say their name, I refuse to really want to call them the Commanders. I think it's the dumbest thing still to this day. So, he did play with 3 quarterbacks as well in 2022, which does make it hard. He did finish with the most explosive receptions, though, of his career with 31, and also caught 95.1% of his catchable targets, which was the highest rate in his career and 12th highest rate among wide receivers in 2022. So, playing for Washington and he catch 95.1%, great. He did have 77 receptions with 1,191 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns, and he was targeted 120 times. Up next, Mr. Mike Williams with the Chargers. So he did post a 1.5% drop rate of 2022, which was tied for the 10th lowest rate among wide receivers last year. He also did catch 57.7% of his contested targets, which was tied for 16th. He did have 63 receptions at 895 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 93 targets. So Williams did what he could. You know, he did put up some numbers, maybe not the best numbers. I'm sure it could have been much better. You know, that's why he's towards the bottom of the list, not the top. Next on the list, Mr. Brandon Ayuk with 49ers. Now, 49ers are a great team. You really can't say much about the 49ers. They don't suck. They're not mediocre. They might not necessarily be the top of the crop, but they obviously managed to make it to the playoffs, which the Eagles did beat them out. But Brock Purdy did get hurt, so they did go through some injuries last year. So Ayuk, he upped his yards per route run, going from 1.61 in 2021 to 1.92 yards per route run in 2022. His passes going his way resulted in 118 passer rating, which was the 8th highest among wide receivers for the year. He did have 78 receptions at 1,015 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 114 times he was targeted. And next on our list was T. Higgins from the Bengals. So he did post the lowest drop rate of his career as well. Wide passes going his way resulted in 121 passer rating. He was the 5th highest among receivers. He did have 74 receptions with 1,029 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns, and he was targeted 190 times. So at the end of the day, these wide receivers are great. These are your top of the top. I mean, obviously, you knew, at least if you follow any form of football, that Tyreek Hill or Justin Jefferson should be one of the top number 1 players. Now, St. Brown squeezed his way just a tad bit up into it. So at the end of the day, what are you going to do? You know, but I really give it up to Tyreek Hill. I thought he was phenomenal and a serious threat when he was on the Chiefs. And, you know, I'm a players person. As much as I am a diehard Eagles fan, I am a players person by heart. So I love people who have serious skill. Like, if you can tell that somebody's a great player, and they're super talented, it is very, very exciting to watch. So that is it, guys. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, anything. I will respond to all comments. I will keep the videos rolling. I try to put out 2 videos a week. Right now, my goal is to put out videos on Thursdays and Sundays, so keep attuned with that. Probably going to shoot for maybe noontime, so Pacific, so pay attention. And I love you. Ta-ta for now.